Hey, it's Lee here, your favorite graveyard creeper, and I just wanted to give you a little friendly heads up before we get into tonight's story. If you have not heard my previous stories, I'd advise you go back and listen to them before this one because they kind of all roll into one for this final exciting chapter of Tales from a Gravedigger. Now, let's get into it. As I stand in the cemetery, staring at the dark, cold clouds full of snow rolling in, a cold, crisp breeze blows against my face and makes my cheeks and nose ice over. Winter came in a swift and vengeful spirit in my little farm town. Dark was soon approaching, and so was my time at the cemetery for the rest of the year. The freezing temps and the snow will make sure that my headstone restoration jobs will come to a stop until spring. But I have one last job to do before I leave, and that is to send that demon wannabe back to hell where he belongs. For the last 2 weeks, I've been brainstorming ways on how to get rid of that soul collector possessing the house on the cemetery line. Now that he knows I'm aware of his existence, I see him staring out the windows of that old wooden house, taunting me, trying to lure me in like a cow into a slaughterhouse. I've been doing my best to keep the hearse driver stocked with coins so he can ferry the lost souls across the lake for their afterlife. But sometimes, a soul slips through and gives in to the soul collector's advances, and he snatches them up, sucking them up like a sock through a vacuum. The other day, I saw him draw a child, and by pretending to be an angel, and told the young boy his family was waiting for him in that house. The poor child didn't hesitate and ran straight into the house of despair. After the wooden door slamming shut behind him, it really pissed me off beyond recognition. I couldn't sleep for a week because of the guilt I had. I just couldn't. I'd wake up with terrible dreams running after the young boy and seeing that demon grabbing a hold of him and pulling him in, and I couldn't fall back to sleep. Every night I'd just lie in bed wishing that the hearse driver was able to get the child before that soul collector could. The one thing I've noticed about him is that he doesn't leave the porch of the house, let alone even come close to the property line. I'm just trying to figure out a way where I can lure him onto the cemetery side, throw him in the back of the hearse driver's car, and he drives him straight to hell. But so far, I got nothing. The only thing I can think of is provoking that creature and somehow him chasing me and then getting him to the driver. But I'm just freaking stumped on how to do that. So one night, I decided to do a test run on a very poorly thought out plan. I thought this one night this could work. So I went up to the property line and I started throwing rocks at the house and calling it any obscure name I could think of, like Dickless, Ass Face, Penis Breath, the usual kind of stuff. But all it did was just stood in the doorway, cocked its head, looked at me in confusion, and then it just started laughing hysterically. And that made me feel real mature about myself. So I stormed away in defeat that night. The following evening came, and this thing caught me off guard. Now I'm fully convinced he's aware of what I've been planning. I was waiting till dark when I knew I'd be alone and nobody else would be coming into the cemetery, trying to make another attempt to lead him into the place. I approached the property line with a few religious objects I borrowed from the church that owns the cemetery. I thought it'd be a nice touch, like holy water, and I kind of borrowed a crucifix that was next to the door when you leave the church. But don't worry, I promise I'll have it back before Sunday. So I stood at the property line and started splashing holy water onto the house's land, and started praying out loud to any god that will listen. All I got in return was an eerie silence. Even the cold breeze stopped blowing. Just literally dead silence. The atmosphere outside and around the house started growing darker and darker. The big old wooden door to the house slowly started to open, and I could hear those sounds of torture growing. As the door opened all the way, the sounds were once again just unbearable. I was bracing myself to see the dark, tall figure show itself in the doorway, but the doorway stood empty. Only those hellish sounds were emitting from the place. The hellish sounds started to die down, and something started to whisper in its place. I couldn't understand the whisper at first, but then something spoke very clearly.
Lee, he has me. Save me. Save us, please.
It was in a voice I haven't heard in years. It was the voice of my baby sister. She died when she was 8 years old. It shattered my heart like glass on concrete. Hearing those words come from that voice. Without thinking, my body just reacted, stepping forward towards the sound.
I got you now, Lee.
A large hand came right out of the weeds in front of me, grabbed my leg and pulled me down to the ground. It was trying to drag me the rest of the way across the property line. I was kicking, punching, panicking was at an all-time high. The large, dark figure was crawling up my body. I was grabbing anything I could find on the ground and throwing it at it. Dirt, rocks, grass, anything. And just then, I could feel a bottle of some sort. So I picked it up and I smashed it against the creature's head, thinking it was a holy water I brought from the church, but it wasn't. It was a perfume bottle. That perfume, it smelled so familiar. Just then, a tall, old woman just appeared behind me, grabbing me by the shoulders and pulled me back onto the cemetery grounds. The soul collector hissed and growled at the woman.
He's mine, Mary.
Then I realized who it was that just saved me. It was Mary Brennan, one of the first monument headstones I restored, and my first encounter with a ghost following me home. She let out a scream and the creature just stood tall, staring at her. His feet came up off the ground and he just glided backwards into the house, and then the door slammed shut. And now here comes the hearse driver, right on time. Thanks, pal. He pulled up right next to me and Mary. Mary slowly started to vanish while the hearse driver tipped his hat at her. Yeah, I'm sitting there laying on the ground now, pissing myself. Well, I think I screwed that one up. He looked at me like a disappointed grandfather. Hey, how come Mary's still here and she hasn't crossed over yet? He just looked at me and he replied,
She's great with children. They don't trust getting into the hearse.
Ah, thank God for that. Then he drove off, leaving his cigar smoke floating in the air. The following day, I went back to the cemetery and I left fresh flowers on Mary's grave and a new bottle of perfume. I felt bad for smashing her bottle against a spawn of Satan. While I was standing over Mary's grave, I was thinking, you know what? I actually got that creature to the property line and he could grab onto me. What if I could somehow use myself as bait and then latch onto him and then pull him over the cemetery line myself and have the hearse driver just pop out and grab him and toss him into the back of the car? Yeah, the wheels are starting to spin now. Then the plan hit me like lightning striking a tree. Knowing that thing could possibly see my every move from the house. Over the next day or two, I would put my plan into action, being very stealthy and very careful of places in the cemetery where that creature can't see me, gathering supplies. After a couple of days of only working in the daylight and staying out of view, I felt that tonight was the right night to end it all. As the sun started to set in the cemetery, I made my way to the other end of the property, where the waters of Lake Huron meets the shorelines of our quaint little resting place. Far out of sight of that creature that resides in that house, the hearse driver pulls up to me right after dark, on time as always. That man is very punctual. He pulls up next to me and steps out of the hearse.
How are we gonna foobar tonight's planned sport?
No foobar tonight. I'm pretty sure this one is solid. He rolled his eyes at me with his cigar hanging out of his mouth, puffing out some smoke. Well, I was going to use myself as bait, but I think I came up with a little bit better plan. I need a distraction from you. Seeing that he hates you and all because you snatch up some of his fresh meat. He nodded. I need you to get him out of the house and up to the property line and off that porch, so I can sneak up to the house. The plan is, I'm going to sneak up there, I'm going to put this silver crucifix around the door handle that I got from a pawn shop in Bad Axe, and then I'm going to lay down an iron pry bar for good measure. Why iron? Because Sam and Dean Winchester said so. You know, so he doesn't try to retreat or anything like a little punk ass. The driver did not look at all impressed. And I'm like, never mind. I just need you to stand at the property line, get his bitch ass to come up to you, start a conversation with him, and then let me go do my thing. And I got the rest of it. But first, I gotta stop by a certain grave to get just one more thing I need for my plan. The driver just slowly turned around, walked back to his hearse, shaking his head in disapproval. But he at least agreed to this plan. So I wanted to make it look like I was leaving the cemetery for the night, so I hopped in my truck and I drove out of there. I wanted to have the element of surprise in my favor. I parked my truck down the road at a township hall. It was about, a 10-minute hustle back to the cemetery. It should be enough time to give the hearse driver to get that creature off the porch and distract him a little bit. As I made my way back, I started coming up on the house and I came down to a very slow crawl trying to catch my breath. I was sneaking up on the side of the house that faced the road where the tall grass grows and try to crawl through it as stealthy as I could like a Navy SEAL, but I'm more like a walrus. In the grass, I could kind of see the hearse driver and the soul collector talking, and it sounded like they're coming up with like some bullshit deal to divide up souls in the cemetery, kind of like a turf war or something like that. And then I heard the creature say,
Fine. I'll give you the child back, but I want 2 souls in return. And one of those souls to be that bitch Mary.
Agreed. I'll call for Mary once you show me that child.
The creature grinned at him and walked back inside, I'm assuming to grab the child. So that gave me a perfect chance to set my first trap. I ran out of the tall grass and ran right up to the property line where the hearse driver stood. I was wearing a backpack. I took it off and I dumped out all the contents right in front of the hearse driver. He just looked at me, very puzzled.
Dirt.
I just smiled at him and gave him the thumbs up and then rushed back to my hiding spot in the tall grass. The second I plopped down, the wooden door opened and here came out the soul collector with the child. And then Mary just appeared right next to the hearse driver without him calling for her. And she didn't look surprised at all to be there. It's almost like she kinda knew already what the plan was. I thought to myself, what a sneaky little bastard. That hearse driver, of course he would know that that soul collector would probably step off the porch for a soul he really wanted. And of course, no one trusting one another, they all just stood there and stared at each other, see who would make the first move. A couple moments passed and I had to stop myself from blurting, "Oh, come on already!" But then, as my patience started to wear thin, the soul collector made the first step. Him and the child slowly walked off the porch and onto the grass in front of the house. Then Mary and the driver stepped forward onto the property of the house. As the creature made it halfway to them, I took my chance and snuck up to the front door of the house and placed the silver cross on the door handle along with the pry bar on the ground, and snuck my way back into the tall, dark grass. The hearse driver and Mary saw my traps were in place now and made the exchange. The driver took a hold of the young boy and pulled him close to his hip, and Mary bowed her head at the creature and walked next to him.
I got a nice warm spot picked out for you, Mary.
Burn in hell, you vile creature of Satan,
replied Mary. They both turned and started walking towards the house. The hearse driver took the child into the cemetery and sat him down under a large tree and walked back towards the house.
Where's my second soul?
He's close.
Then I stood up out of the grass and ran towards the driver and stood next to him. The creature grinned. That grin made all the hairs stand up on my body. My voice shaking and I'm trying to sound brave. I'm right here. Come and get it. I don't go down without a fight though, you son of a whore. His smile grew wider, and him and Mary slowly started approaching the house more. But then, when he reached his hand out to touch the door handle, his hand started to sizzle. Then Mary smacked him across the face, damn near took his head off, and then she just vanished.
You little shit, I'm gonna tear your soul out through your ass.
Sounding more braver, I'm like, "Ha! Come and try!" The creature tore off the porch and right at me and flew up to me and wrapped his hands around my neck. The hearse driver tried to intervene but failed as the creature flew him off of us. And then I started to smirk and laugh at the creature while choking. The creature looked at me. He loosened his grip a little bit, just said,
What's so damn funny?
I just looked at him and I said, Well, there's someone here who doesn't like his ground being disturbed, and you're standing in his dirt.
What?
The creature looked down and he saw he was standing in a small pile of dirt. Before the creature could figure it out, an old man from the cursed ground appeared right behind him and placed his hands over his face, pressing his fingers into his eye sockets. The old man had a tight grip on his head, and the creature was flailing around. And then the hearse driver pulls up in that sweet black Cadillac hearse of his. The hearse driver jumps out and runs up to us and grabs the creature by the legs, lifting him up in the air. And the two of them drag his ass over to the back of the hearse and opens up the door. They kind of look like a couple of body snatchers, if they work for the mafia in a cemetery. Then they throw the creature into the back of the hearse, run into the front seats, and just tear off out of there, right to the shoreline of Lake Huron. And then there was a bright light and they were gone. After my initial shock, my fat ass started to celebrate, jumping up and down and cheering and pumping my fists in the air. In the midst of my celebration, I forgot about the young boy under the tree that the hearse driver placed down. I looked towards the direction of the tree, and wouldn't you know it, Miss Mary was already there holding hands with the young child. They both just faded away as the sun started to peek over the horizon. Some time passed a little bit. I waited for the hearse driver to return, and I actually found him lurking in the shadows of the morning sun, knowing his shift is about to end for the day. I ran up to him and just asked a quick question. Is he back in hell? The driver looked at me and nodded. He was puffing on a celebratory cigar, and the smoke filled my nostrils. I cannot believe that worked. Like, holy shit. Really, it actually worked. Take that, Ghost Adventures. You ain't got shit on me. I celebrated right then. I could see the truck pulling into the cemetery. It was a head caretaker, and the hearse driver was gone. The cemetery's head caretaker was pulling in for his shift. He drove right up to me, and he unrolled his window with a smile and looked at me. Hey, I thought I saw your truck down the road. What'd you do? Break down and came back here and spent the night? Yeah, the guy's laughing at his own question. Well, I'm sorry you're done for the rest of the year, but I hope to see you next spring. Hell yeah, you will. Good. I was hoping this job wasn't too weird for ya. Yeah, sometimes people get spooked from the job. The hearse driver can be unsettling to most folks. Wait, what? That son of a bitch knew this whole time I was working. He knew about it. Oh God, he knew about everything. He didn't try to Oh! You know what, boss? I got something for you. I reached in my pocket and I pulled out my middle finger. He just chuckled at me. And then I handed him a handful of quarters, and he started laughing hysterically. You know what? I'm done for the year. I'll see you next spring. Okay, so that was our epic conclusion of Tales from a Gravedigger. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys, if you're not a subscriber, please tickle that subscribe button. It would tickle my fancy if you did. Well, anyways, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully, if you guys enjoyed the stories, let me know, and I'll try to come up with some more. It is springtime, and I will be working back into the cemetery getting some more footage. Until then, I'll see you later.